Dalia, Fahmy is the Director of International Relations and an Associate Professor of Political Science at Long Island University. She joins us now live from Princeton. Very good to have you on the program, Dalia. I'd like to ask you about a comment from the Iranian foreign minister that he made here in Istanbul. He said, "We can't allow a lawless bully to take us back to the law of the jungle." Is that what we're seeing now, a return to the law of the jungle?
What we are seeing is that one of the objectives of Netanyahu that he's had for a very long time is being met. He has had his eye on Iran for quite a while, and it's President Trump who's led this to fruition. Now, if we take a step back and remember, it was 2015 where under the JCPOA, there was an agreement on the books that was, enshrined at the United Nations, limiting Iran's nuclear capacity. And it was rather successful, even though the Western countries had not lifted all the sanctions. And what you saw since then, since the breaking of the Obama, Trump's allegation as the Obama plan, since the lifting of that plan, you did see an increase in Iranian activity. However, both U.S. intelligence and the IAEA have said that there wasn't a nuclear weapon on the horizon. And so it begs the question of why now and why this. What we did see yesterday is that there were 14 actually, bunker buster bombs. And, remember, these are 10,000-pound bombs dropped throughout the three major sites. The one Natan being, what Trump says, completely and totally obliterated. Now, what we do know is that there isn't intelligence on the ground to tell us the extent of the damage. And so in terms of the language and the objectives being met, it's not clear about what the ultimate objective is. We saw, for example, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance say that we are not at war with Iran, rather we are at war with Iran's nuclear program. Now, in terms of legal language, that doesn't work. President Trump did say that we are not looking for regime change. And then within a few hours, he's on Truth Social writing that, no, we are for regime change. And so what the ultimate objective here is unclear. The timing also is quite telling. And the fact that both U.S. intelligence and the IAEA say that there was not a nuclear capacity on the brink, begs the question of what then is the ultimate objective.
But do you think then that, following these U.S. strikes, could there now be voices heard in Iran that are actually calling for a nuclear weapon? Iran keeps saying that, no, our whole sort of nuclear system, it's developed to be civilian, peaceful. But following these kinds of strikes, do you think that there might be more people actually saying, no, actually, we need to develop a nuclear weapon?
Right, and that's the rhetoric we've actually seen. So obviously, yes, Iran is weaker. The facilities have been attacked. But what we are seeing is that, they're probably 5 to 10 years away from creating one now because of what's happened to them. And so these attacks might actually, and what the rhetoric is telling us, is exacerbate the need to have one. We even saw a few Iranian officials tweet out that, or pundits, I should say, that why does nobody attack North Korea? Because of their nuclear capability. Perhaps we actually have to have nuclear capability to protect ourselves. And so it could be that these strikes are actually exacerbating. And that's even what U.S. intelligence is saying, that this should not have happened because it will expedite the process. Now, it's not just about Iran. Look at the region as a whole. What if Iran responds by attacking U.S. assets, for example, in Bahrain or in Qatar or in Kuwait? What does that lead to the entirety of the region in terms of further destabilization? Why would the U.S. want that? It actually doesn't. And so it really begs the question of whose interest is being met. Unfortunately, it's becoming increasingly clear that it's not in U.S. strategic interest or in terms of U.S. national security to pursue this policy. And so it again begs the question of why this, why now? President Trump was supposed to be the president of diplomacy, and now he's entered perhaps the United States in one of these forever wars that he warned against when he was running for president.
So where do you see Iran going now? Can they just ignore these U.S. strikes and just keep on focusing on sort of Israeli strikes and retaliate against them? Or do you think that, are they actually going to strike U.S. bases? Or can Iran do nothing and then just sort of go to the negotiating table and let a version of diplomacy win in the end?
So it's not clear. For example, Iran was struck with targeted assassinations, and they didn't really respond in a heavy-handed way. This perhaps could be different, but it begs the question of, how would they respond to both appease their leadership, but also to appease their population who feels threatened and under attack. We know that there are hundreds of deaths and thousands of injuries. It was residential areas that were also hit a couple of days ago. And so it's not clear how Iran is going to respond. Would they attack US assets, for example, in Bahrain or Kuwait or Qatar? It would not be also in Iran's best interest to do so because of their economic ties and relations, right? How would Saudi Arabia respond? If the crown prince perhaps is hedging both bets on both sides. And so, again, not clear how Iran would respond. What we did hear today from the leadership and the Iranian leadership of the Security Council was that they are seeing this as an act of war. They're seeing this as an act of pressing on their sovereignty, but more so that why should they come to the negotiating table? You don't force people through brute force to come to diplomacy. Diplomacy was supposed to have happened last Sunday in Oman in the 6th round of negotiations on energy between the U.S. On nuclear weapons, nuclear energy, I should say, between the U.S. and Iran. So there was a diplomatic process at hand. Just a few days before the Israeli airstrikes, President Trump was saying we're going to the negotiating table. It was supposed to happen last Sunday in Oman, and today it's a very very different week. And so again, where is this headed? Why is this the situation? Where is it leading us? It's not clear how Iran is going to respond. But if Iran's leadership wants to hold on to power, perhaps they need to mitigate the two.
All right, it'll be a difficult one for them for sure. Dalia Fahmy, some from the Long Island University, thank you so much for your time and your insight here on the program.